Stars explode in the quiet night.
Chapter 1. The Corpse Light of Spectra. The horizon's whisper did not fly near Spectra, it crawled. Before them, the corpse of a star painted the void with its dying scream. Phantom, the black hole was a perfect circle of absolute blackness, a hole punched through reality itself. Around it, the supernova remnant nebula, the shroud churned a vast luminous tapestry of ionized gas in hues of decaying violet, corpse green, and bruised indigo threaded with filaments of pure darkness. At its heart, bathed in the shroud's sickly radiance, orbited Spectra. The planet did not look solid. It shimmered, a mirage hanging between existence and oblivion. Whisper Aris's voice was a dry rasp, his knuckles white on the console. Quantum stability readings now. The ship's Ari, a voice of calm synthetic reason in the face of the irrational, responded instantly. Quantum coherence, field strength 68.3% fluctuating. Readings anomalous. Sensors report improbabilities. Visual confirmation unreliable. Caution, reality perception hazard. Aris let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. 68%. It was worse than the long-range scans had suggested. Define improbabilities. Mountain at bearing 045 phased through itself 3 seconds ago, Whisper said. River Delta 098 flows uphill in visual spectrum, downhill in infrared. Atmospheric composition scans contradict each other between passes. On the main viewer, Spectra flickered. A range of jagged peaks like broken teeth against the nebula's glow momentarily dissolved into a churning silver ocean before snapping back into jagged rock. Light bent in impossible ways, creating phantom sunsets on the night side, a permanent sickly twilight. Landing protocol, Aris said. Maximum sensor redundancy. Designate ephemeral landing. The name felt like a prayer on his lips, a plea for the ground to be there when he touched it. The descent was a descent into madness. The Whisper shuddered not from turbulence, but from contradictions. Proximity alarms screamed at empty space, while silent fractal lightning branched across the viewport without a sound. The hull temperature gauge spiked to molten levels, yet external sensors reported near absolute zero. Aris felt a disorienting pull, not from gravity, but from the sheer wrongness pressing in on the ship on his mind. He saw double, triple versions of the control panel superimposed, flickering between a standard Terran layout and something organic pulsating with faint light. Compensating, he muttered, forcing his hands to work the controls he trusted, not the ones he saw. Whisper filter visual feed. Prioritize gravitational and quantum topography. The view on the screen shifted, simplifying into a topographical map of stability. The ephemeral landing zone was a pale blue patch in a sea of violent red and chaotic orange. He guided the ship down, his stomach lurching as the very concept of down seemed to shift. They landed with a gentle sigh of maneuvering thrusters on a plain of shifting iridescent sand. The ground crunched like glass under the landing struts one moment, then gave way like fog the next. Aris sat for a long minute listening to the ship's systems hum, a solitary sane sound in an insane world. Stepping out was like stepping into a funhouse mirror designed by a nightmare. The air was thick, silent, and tasted of static and ozone coating his tongue. Distant mountains pulsed like slow, colossal heartbeats. A nearby rock formation flowed like liquid, then solidified into something entirely different, a twisted spire, 1 second a gaping toothy more the next. "Whisper life signs," Aris whispered, afraid that raising his voice might shatter the fragile reality around him. "Biological scans," Negative Whisper said, "energy signatures detected, non-corporeal, designation phantoms, quantum entanglement patterns suggest intelligence, manifesting." Figures coalesced from the shimmering air, not solid, but distortions, humanoid shapes woven from refracted light and condensed shadow. They had no faces, only shifting points of light where eyes might be, and they radiated an emotion so pure and potent it was a physical force, terror, an icy existential dread that seeped through Aris's environment suit and into his bones. One drifted closer. Aris stood frozen, a specimen pinned for examination. He felt its fear like a physical chill, the terror of dissolution, of fading into the uncaring void. It reached out a limb that was simultaneously smoke and crystal. Its touch was nothingness, a brief horrifying void where Aris's arm should have been. There was no pain, only a profound and absolute absence. He jerked back with a gasp, stumbling on the shifting sand. His arm was intact, solid, but the memory of non-existence lingered, a ghost limb of void. "Communication attempt detected," Whisper said. "Pure emotional bandwidth, terror, urgency." "They are scared," Aris breathed, the realization chilling him deeper than the phantom touch. This was not an attack, it was a desperate plea. "They are fading." As if to confirm his words, one of the phantoms near the edge of the group flickered violently. Its soft light dimmed its form, becoming translucent, indistinct. It emitted a silent scream that Aris felt in the very marrow of his bones, a wave of pure, despairing loss. Then it was simply less, a faint smudge of light against the iridescent sand, and then gone, a fade out. "Quantum coherence field, strength 63.1%, Whisper said. "Fade-out event correlates with shredding in the Shroud Nebula. Hypothesis: nebula expansion is diluting the exotic particles that stabilize Spectra's quantum field." The surviving phantoms swirled around Aris, their terror now a palpable, suffocating pressure. Images flooded his mind, not through words, but through raw sensation, the comforting, constant thrum of the old, strong quantum field, the creeping horror of feeling their very essence, their memories, their selves begin to unravel, the chilling, absolute silence of the void that awaited them. The ground beneath Aris's feet rippled violently. His boots sank into what was suddenly viscous black mud. Then the ground solidified instantly into razor-sharp crystal, slicing a gash in his suit's leg plating. He cried out, stumbling back, pain flaring up his calf. "Whisper, is there a stabilization solution, anything?" "A concentration of stabilizing particles is required within Spectra's field," Whisper said. "The particle source is specific high-energy regions within the shredding nebula. So we need to harvest stardust from a black hole's doorstep," Aris said, his mind reeling. "How?" "Utilize shuttle quantum thief," Whisper said. "Modify cargo hold as containment attractor field. Navigate the shredding nebula, collecting particle-dense matter from designated nursery sectors. Deploy collected matter at key geodesic points on Spectra, extreme risk, navigating unstable reality within nebula." The phantoms surged around him as he limped back towards the Whisper, their forms flickering with a new desperate emotion, a fragile, terrifying sliver of hope. Their silent plea was no longer just a weight of terror, it was a weight of responsibility settling on his soul like a leaden cloak. He had come to observe, to study. Now he was their only anchor in a sea of dissolving reality. Chapter 2: The Calculus of Ghosts. Log entry: Dr. Aris Thorne, supplemental location: surface of Spectra ephemeral landing site, stardate 781.08 Terran adjusted. The silence in the Whisper's med bay was a lie. It was filled with the memory of screaming sensors, the phantom chill of a touch that was not there, and the lingering static of unreality crackling in Aris's teeth. The autosurgeon had sealed the gash in his calf, but the skin still tingled with the memory of being both mud and crystal. He stared at the regenerated tissue, a perfect sterile pink against his skin. It felt like a mask over a wound that went deeper than flesh. The phantoms were still out there. He could feel them, a constant low-grade hum of anxiety at the edge of his perception, like a toothache in his soul. Their terror had been replaced by a desperate, watchful hope. It was a heavier burden. Whisper: run the simulation again. Focus on the transition from Spectra's quantum field to the shroud's turbulence. Affirmative. Displaying, Whisper said. A holographic star chart bloomed in the center of the cockpit. Spectra was a fragile, shimmering bubble of semi-stable reality. Encasing it, the Shroud Nebula was a violent storm of conflicting probabilities, represented by a churning maelstrom of red and orange data streams. The designated nursery sector Theta glowed a treacherous, promising violet deep within. The quantum thief is rated for high-energy particle collection, not this. Aris gestured at the hologram, where a simulated shuttle was instantly torn into probabilistic fragments. Its structural integrity field is not designed for localized quantum collapse. Correct, Whisper said. Modifications are required. Proposal: reroute primary power from non-essential systems to reinforce the quantum coherence shield. Modify the cargo hold containment field into a radial attractor, projecting a wider collection net. Risk shield strength will be volatile. A direct impact from a reality scar will still be catastrophic. And if I strengthen the shield too much, the attractor field will not be strong enough to pull in sufficient particles, Aris said. It is a balancing act on a tightrope over an abyss. He sighed, massaging his temples. And the particles themselves, you are sure they will stabilize the field here? Theoretically, Whisper said. The particles, which I have designated anchorites, possess a unique quantum signature that resists entropy and enforces causality. They are the reason the nursery sectors retain any coherence. Introducing a critical mass to Spectra's field should reinforce its structure, slowing and potentially reversing the fade-outs. Theoretically, Aris said, I have built a career on that word. It feels thin out here. He stood his leg, protesting slightly. Begin the modifications. Prioritize the attractor field. I would rather collect a lot of anchors quickly and be fragile than be a sturdy rock that collects nothing. Modifications commencing, Whisper said. Estimated duration 4 hours. 4 hours. He looked at the viewport. The phantoms had gathered outside a silent, shimmering vigil. Their forms shifted and pulsed, mirroring the unstable landscape. He could not just sit here. Whisper, I am going to attempt a more focused communication. See if I can get more than just terror and urgency. I need data history context. Advised, Whisper said. maintains psychological monitoring. Prolonged empathic link with non-corporeal entities of pure emotion may have unforeseen effects. Acknowledged Aris took a deep breath and stepped back out into the silent, shifting world. The lead phantom, the one that had first touched him, drifted forward. The points of light that served as its eyes were calmer now, but the intensity was undiminished. Aris focused, pushing past his own fear, trying to project not just reception, but questions: who are you? What was this place before? The response was not a linear narrative. It was a cascade of sensory impressions. A vision of Spectra, whole and vibrant. The mountains were not jagged, threatening teeth, but graceful, soaring spires of obsidian and amethyst. Rivers of liquid light flowed in coherent, beautiful patterns across plains of iridescent moss. The sky was not a palette of decaying colors, but a gentle, constant aurora, the shroud, a distant, beautiful veil. The phantoms were not distorted refugees, but beings of pure, joyful energy weaving through the stable landscape, their forms intricate and complex. They were not alone. The images showed other stranger life forms, crystalline insects that sang in harmonic frequencies, floating flora that bloomed with miniature nebulae. Then the first tremor, a sensation of a fundamental crack in the universe. The images turned dark. The comforting thrum of their world began to stutter. The rivers of light flickered. The stable ground turned to shifting sand. The other life forms, the singers, the bloomers, were the first to go. Their fade-outs were silent, pathetic little snuffs of light and song. The phantoms felt each one as a searing loss. The final, overwhelming sensation was of a great, slow leak, as if the planet itself was bleeding reality into the void. They were trying to hold it together, their collective consciousness acting as a patch on a ruptured dam, but they were tired, so very, very tired. Aris gasped, stumbling back a step. The weight of their memory of their loss was a physical blow. He saw the phantom before him not as a terrifying anomaly, but as a librarian watching their library burn, desperately trying to save the last few books. "I understand," he whispered the words inadequate. "We will try." The phantom seemed to solidify for a moment. The points of light brightened, and for the first time Aris felt a new emotion emanate from it, clean and sharp and startlingly familiar: respect. It was followed by a single clear image, the quantum thief modified and ready, piercing the nebula. "Modifications complete," Whisper said. "The quantum thief is ready for launch." Aris nodded, the image from the phantom still burning in his mind. He turned, and Ray entered the Whisper. The shuttle bay airlock hissed open, revealing the modified craft. It looked aggressive. Conduits glowed with redirected power, and a large dish-like emitter was now mounted beneath its nose, the attractor field projector. The flight console was a mess of new jury-rigged readouts. Quantum fluctuation gauges, reality integrity meters, anchorite particle density scanners. He ran a hand over the controls, a pilot getting to know a new and deadly beast. "Whisper, transfer all control to the thief's cockpit. Keep a real-time link. If I stop making sense, you have command override." "Affirmative," Whisper said. "Link established. Good luck, Doctor." The inner airlock sealed. With a low hum, the quantum thief powered up. The launch sequence was smooth, the shuttle lifting on its own and turning towards the bay doors. They slid open, revealing the shimmering, mad landscape of Spectra, and beyond it, the swirling, beautiful, and terrifying more of the shroud. The phantoms had gathered in a vast silent crowd. Thousands of them, a sea of shifting light and shadow, their forms rippling like a field of grass in a cosmic wind. As the quantum thief passed over them, they did something new. As one, they flared. Their light intensified not in terror, but in a unified silent salute. A wave of focused intention washed over Aris, a complex weave of hope, gratitude, and a grim shared determination. It was the feeling of an army watching its only champion ride out to face the dragon. Then he was through the atmosphere, and the full naked insanity of the shroud filled his viewport. The transition was like plunging into a freezing ocean after wading in a shallow, warm bay. Space-time itself felt sticky, resistant. Stars did not just twinkle, they stuttered, appearing in multiple positions at once. Distances lied. His navigation console flickered, unable to lock on to a stable frame of reference. Entering the shroud's outer boundary, he reported, his voice tight. The thief shuddered, as if being shaken by a giant hand. Activating navigational predictive model, gidding by anchorite density. A stream of superheated gas ahead of him froze, reversed, and flowed upwards in a perfect, impossible parabola. He banked sharply to avoid it. Whisper time, flow consistency. Localized temporal fluctuations detected, Whisper said. Advise caution, nursery sector theta is 3.7 light-minutes ahead at current sub-light velocity. 3.7 light-minutes in normal space. That was a short hop. Here it felt like a journey to another galaxy. He pushed the throttle forward, the engines whining in protest, as they fought not just vacuum, but the fabric of reality itself. A jagged tear of wrongness, a reality scar, bloomed to his port side, a rip in the starfield that showed a swirling vortex of non-Euclidean geometry. He jerked the controls, veering away, as a tendril of negation lashed out, missing the hull by meters. This was no longer a scientific survey, it was a heist, and he was stealing fire from a heaven that was actively trying to erase him. The grateful, hopeful silence of the phantoms was a distant memory, replaced by the screaming, contradictory chaos of the storm. He was in the belly of the beast now, and it was hungry. Chapter 3: The Storm Stealer. Log entry: Dr. Aris Thorne, real-time vocal capture. Location: the Shroud Nebula, approaching nursery sector theta. Stardate 781.11, Terran adjusted. The log is not a calm, post-facto recording. It is a ragged, breathing thing, punctuated by the shriek of alarms and the strain in Aris's voice. Vocal log active. I am in it, deep. The whisper's predictive model is, it is like trying to navigate a hurricane by reading tea leaves. The stars are lying. My own instruments are lying. A moment ago, the navigational console told me I was flying backwards at twice the speed of light. I am not, I think. The sound of a violent shudder, metal groaning. That was something, not an impact, a reality shear. The port side of the shuttle is now 3 microseconds younger than the starboard side. The differential is putting stress on the welds. Whisper is compensating. Adjusting temporal harmonics, Whisper said. Stress within tolerance. Anchorite density increasing. Nursery sector theta boundary in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. I can see it. It is beautiful. Ahead, the chaotic fury of the shroud coalesced. Nursery Sector Theta was a vast, swirling vortex of violet and silver, a cosmic nursery where the laws of physics, while still tortured, held on with a desperate tenacity. Rivers of the iridescent anchorite particles flowed in luminous currents, threading through tendrils of absolute blackness that drank the light. It was a place of creation and negation, existing side by side. Crossing the boundary, activating a tractor field now. A low, powerful hum resonated through the quantum thief as the dish beneath its nose flared to life. A wide, shimmering net of energy projected forward, and immediately the ship bucked. It was like dragging a net through a sea of solid light. The iridescent dust began to stream into the modified cargo hold, the containment field glowing brighter with each passing second. Anchorite collection at 15%, Whisper said. Optimal efficiency. Maintain course. For how long? This place feels attentive. It did. The very space around him seemed to resent the theft. The gentle, chaotic swirl of the nebula outside the nursery began to tighten, to focus. The tendrils of darkness shifted, coiling like serpents. Reality scar formation, Whisper said. Bearing 270, Mach 010, converging. Damn it, already, Aris's hands flew over the controls, diverting more power to the thrusters. How long until the hold is full? Estimated 4 minutes at current rate, Whisper said. We do not have 4 minutes. He banked the shuttle, weaving between two rivers of anchorites. A jagged tear in reality, a reality scar, bloomed where they had just been, lashing out with a tendril of nothingness that erased a nearby cloud of gas from existence. This was the dance, a frantic, terrifying ballet of avarice and evasion. He flew not by sight, but by the gut-wrenching data on his quantum fluctuation gauges, jinking and spinning through the nursery, the attractor field gulping down the precious particles. 30%, 45%. Another scar opened directly ahead, a vertical slit of screaming impossibility. Aris pulled up hard, the G-forces pressing him into his seat. The thief's wings passed through the edges of the scar. For a heart-stopping moment, the viewport flickered. He did not see the nebula. He saw a vast, silent, dark plain under a sky of frozen green fire. A memory trapped in the scar, a glimpse into another reality. Then it was gone, and the alarms were screaming. Port wing coherence compromised, Whisper said. Localized quantum collapse detected. A section of the port wing, the size of a man, was now wrong. It flickered between solid metal, translucent energy, and a bizarre, coral-like growth. It was no longer entirely part of this shuttle. Compensating with starboard thrusters, how is our collection? 68%, Whisper said. The scar activity is intensifying. They are converging on our energy signature. They were being hunted. The nebula itself was recognizing them as an infection, a foreign body, and was mobilizing its immune system, scars of unbeing. Aris saw them now, multiple jagged tears, ringing the nursery sector, moving to cut off his escape. Whisper, plot me an exit vector, the craziest, most improbable path out of here you can find, something they will not expect. Calculating, Whisper said. Proposal, dive towards the central vortex. Gravitational shear will be extreme, but the scar formation is less dense. Utilize the black hole's influence as a slingshot. Are you insane? That will take us right to the edge of Phantom's event horizon. Affirmative, Whisper said. It is also the path with the highest probability of survival, 12.7%. Aris let out a wild, strained laugh. 12%. I have built my career on worse odds. He slammed the throttle forward, executing. The quantum thief nosed down, plunging towards the heart of the violet vortex. The gravitational forces seized the tiny craft, crushing Aris into his seat. The groans of the hull became screams. The flickering section of the wing began to peel away, unmade molecule by molecule into glittering dust. Anchorite collection, 89%, 92%, 97%, collection complete. Cargo hold at capacity. Now to get it home, Whisper, full power to the coherence shield. Brace for slingshot. He was flying blind now, the viewport a smear of violet light and twisting darkness. Phantom's pull was an immense, silent hand, crushing space and time around him. He felt the shuttle stretch, a sensation that was both physical and metaphysical. For a terrifying instant, he felt his own consciousness begin to thin, to smear across the void. Then the thief shot out of the vortex like a stone from a catapult, flung back towards the outer shroud and the shimmering mirage of Spectra. The reality scars, caught off guard by the suicidal maneuver, lashed at empty space behind him. He was through, battered, half unmade but through. The flight back to Spectra was a blur of pain and fadding adrenaline. The shuttle handled like a brick, its port wing still sporadically phasing in and out of existence. But the cargo hold glowed with a steady, beautiful, iridescent light. As he broke through Spectra's atmosphere, the sight that greeted him stole what little breath he had left. The planet was dying. Vast swathes of the continent below now looked like a corrupted data file, pixelated and glitching. A whole ocean had been replaced by a swirling, abstract pattern of light and shadow. The sky was a cacophony of phantom lightning that cast negative light, creating shadows that moved with a life of their own. And the phantoms, they were everywhere, clustering together in terrified, fadding knots. Their collective light was dim, flickering like a guttering candle. Whisper status of the Nexus. The Nexus's quantum signature has weakened by 42% since departure, Whisper said. Total collapse is imminent. Without the Nexus, the planetary field will disintegrate in hours. No time for careful deployment. Aris gritted his teeth, his hands gripping the controls. We do this the messy way, plot the most critical geodesic points. We are making a supply run under fire. Affirmative, Whisper said, designating 3 primary anchor points. The first is the ephemeral landing site itself. The Nexus is gathered there. Aris pushed the crippled quantum thief into a steep dive. The landscape below warped and bled as he descended. He saw the horizons whisper below, a tiny island of sanity in a sea of madness, surrounded by a dense, desperate throng of phantoms. At their center, he could just make out the Nexus, a being that had once pulsed with the power of a star, now dim and shrunken, its light barely a flicker. Opening cargo bay doors, deploying anchorites at Point Alpha. He hit the release. A torrent of shimmering, iridescent particles erupted from the thief's hold, cascading down over the landing site like life-giving rain. The effect was not gentle. The very air screamed. Reality, forced to become more solid, recoiled violently. The ground beneath the Whisper solidified with a thunderous crack, the shifting sand freezing into a jagged, glassy plain. The phantoms flared, their forms momentarily sharpening before blurring again, caught between states. The Nexus pulsed once, a weak gray flash. It was not enough. Anchorite deployment successful, Whisper said. Localized stability increased by 9%. Nexus coherence stabilized, but not reversed. The patient is still bleeding out. Aris looked at his remaining anchorites. 2 more deployments. He had to make them count. Whisper, give me the next point. We are not losing them. Point Beta, Whisper said, the former Great River Delta, now a zone of temporal fracture. The quantum thief turned, its engines sputtering, and shot towards a horizon that was rapidly forgetting what a horizon was. The real battle for Spectra had just begun, and he was its only, desperately inadequate soldier. Chapter 4: The Fractured Heart of Time. Log entry: Dr. Aris Thorne, real-time vocal capture. Location: Spectran skis, en route to Point Beta. Stardate 781.13, Terran adjusted. The log is a raw, panting thing. The sound of the quantum thief's tortured engines is a constant whine in the background. Point Alpha deployed, minimal effect. The Nexus is holding, but just barely. It is like giving a transfusion to a patient who is still bleeding from a severed artery. We have to clamp the wound. The shuttle lurches violently, a sound like tearing fabric. Port attractor emitter just tore loose. We are trailing a wake of half-contained reality. Whisper, what is our status? Structural integrity at 41%, Whisper said. Anchorite containment in the remaining hold is stable. Point Beta is ahead. The Great River Delta. Sensors indicate a severe temporal fracture. Aris saw it. Where once a mighty river might have flowed into a sea, there was now a scar in time itself. The landscape was a dizzying collage of overlapping epochs. He saw a lush, vibrant jungle superimposed over a barren, cracked desert, which itself flickered into a frozen tundra. A school of silver, bioluminescent fish swam through the air where the river should have been, while below, the skeletons of leviathans bleached in a sun that was not there. Time is shattered here, he breathed. How do we anchor a place that exists in multiple nows? The anchorites enforce causality, Whisper said. Their presence will force a single, stable timeline to dominate. However, the initial reaction will be volatile. The temporal fracture will resist. Volatile, right. Aris took a deep breath, his hands sweaty on the controls, beginning the run. He descended towards the fractured delta. The moment the quantum thief crossed the boundary, the world outside the viewport became a strobing nightmare. 1 second, he was flying through a prehistoric jungle, the leaves of giant ferns scraping against the hull. The next, he was in a vacuum, the stars sharp and cold above a dead world. Then a wall of water surrounded him, the pressure gauges spiking. Whisper, I am losing temporal lock. Adjusting, Whisper said. Hull is experiencing multiple temporal states simultaneously. Stress is accelerating. A loud bang echoed from the rear. A section of the hull aged 1,000 years in an instant, flacking into rust. Another section, just meters away, reverted to its pristine, factory new state. Deploying anchorites now, let us give this place a present to remember. He hit the release. The second cascade of iridescent particles poured from the hold, a river of stability meeting an ocean of chaos. The result was an explosion of solidified time. The overlapping landscapes recoiled from each other like repelling magnets. The jungle, the desert, the tundra, and the ocean snapped apart, then slammed together in a cataclysmic crash of rock, ice, and water that was instantly frozen, then vaporized, then turned to dust. A shockwave of temporal force, a time boom, rippled outwards, visible as a shimmering, silent ring that aged everything it touched by decades in a second. The quantum thief was caught in the blast. Aris screamed as he felt his body lurch forward and backward in his seat simultaneously. The control panel in front of him was a blur of ancient, corroded buttons and sleek, future tech touchscreens. He saw his own hand wrinkle with age, then become the smooth hand of a child. The psychological disorientation was worse than any physical pain. Temporal coherence compromised, Whisper said, initiating emergency shielding. A blue field flickered around the cockpit, stabilizing the immediate interior. The violent temporal shifts ceased, but the damage was done. Warning lights illuminated across the board, a Christmas tree of failures. Report. Port thruster is offline, Whisper said. Life support is on auxiliary power. Anchorite deployment was 87% successful. Point beta has stabilized. The temporal fracture has collapsed into a single, stable wasteland. Aris looked down. The beautiful, terrible collage was gone. In its place was a flat, gray, geologically boring plain. It was stable, it was solid, it was dead. The vibrant, if fractured, history of this place had been erased, replaced by a blank canvas. The cost of stability was the utter loss of what once was. A wave of guilt washed over him, so potent it felt like a physical blow. He had not just saved this world, he had sanitized it. He had traded its beautiful, insane history for a sterile present. Quantum coherence field strength for Spectra, 58.7%, Whisper said. The rate of decline has slowed by 22%. The strategy is working. It is working, Aris repeated, the words tasting like ash. But what are we saving, Whisper? A ghost of a ghost. We are preventing total dissolution into the void, Whisper said. The phantoms are stabilizing. He looked at his long-range scanner. Across the planet, the frantic, flickering clusters of phantoms were indeed calming. Their light was still dim, but the frantic panic was receding. They were still scared, but now there was a thread of hope. A fragile, desperate thing. He had to see it through. Point Gamma, the final deployment. Where? Point Gamma, Whisper said, the spire of lost causality, the heart of the planet's original quantum fluctuation. Stabilizing it will amplify the effect of the other two deployments exponentially. The navigation chart highlighted a location on the far side of the planet, a place where the very first crack in reality had appeared, where the unraveling had begun. Setting course, give me everything we have left, Whisper. Remaining power is being rerouted to the starboard thruster and life support, Whisper said. We will have one pass, one deployment. The quantum thief, now a limping, battered wreck, turned towards its final destination. As it flew over the stabilized plains of Point Beta, Aris saw a single, tiny shoot of iridescent green push its way through the gray soil. A spark of new life in the barren world he had created. It was a small thing, but it felt like a pardon. The flight to Point Gamma was a funeral procession. The shuttle was dying around him. Alerts chimed softly, announcing the failure of non-essential system after system. The air grew cold as life support struggled. He was alone with the hum of the engines and the glowing, precious cargo in the hold, the last of the anchorites, the last hope for Spectra. As he approached Point Gamma, he saw it was not a mountain or a structure. It was a wound, a perpetual swirling vortex of unreality, a kilometer-wide tear where the laws of physics had never taken hold. It was a window into the primordial chaos before the universe began. Colors that did not have names swirled there. Shapes that defied geometry pulsed in and out of existence. It was the source of Spectra's magic and the source of its cancer. And at its event horizon, hovering on the very brink of the abyss, was the Nexus Phantom. It had gathered the last of its strength and flown to the heart of the storm. It was not trying to escape. It was trying to plug the leak with its own being. Its form was stretched, thin, its light being pulled into the vortex. It was sacrificing itself. The final anchor, Aris whispered, understanding. We do not just deploy it near the spire. We have to throw it into the wound. Affirmative, Whisper said. The Nexus is attempting to become the conduit. We must provide the foundation. The risk is total. If we miss, or if the vortex rejects it, the backlash would unmake the quantum thief, Whisper said, and possibly cause a cascade failure through the entire planetary field. Aris lined up his approach. The shuttle shuddered, its single remaining thruster burning a deep, angry red. The vortex of Point Gamma loomed before him, a screaming mouth of nothingness. The Nexus was a faint, brave star at its center, holding the jaws of chaos open, just a crack. This is it, Aris said, his voice suddenly calm. One last theft for the ghosts. He pushed the throttle to the firewall and flew straight into the storm. Chapter 5: The Anchor and the Abyss. Log entry: Dr. Aris Thorne, real-time vocal capture. Location: Point Gamma, the Spire of Lost Causality. Stardate 781.15, Terran adjusted. The log is a raw scream of metal and will. The sound of the vortex is a physical pressure, a roar that exists beyond sound. Committing final run. The quantum thief plunged into the screaming heart of Spectra. The Spire of Lost Causality was not a place, it was an idea made manifest, the idea of before physics. The viewport did not show a landscape, it showed the raw, undifferentiated potential of a universe that had not yet chosen its laws. Colors were sounds. Gravity was a taste, metallic and sharp on his tongue. Time was a solid thing he had to push through. The Nexus Phantom was a lighthouse in the storm, but its light was being devoured, stretched into a long, faint smear into the abyss. It was a king holding the door against an army of chaos, and its strength was failing. Hull coherence at 19%, Whisper said. We are being unmade. Aris did not need the warning, he could feel it. The skin on his left hand flickered, becoming momentarily translucent, showing the bone beneath. The control stick in his grip felt like mist and solid steel at the same time. Targeting the Nexus, it is the only conduit that can survive the injection. Confirmed, Whisper said, releasing final anchorite payload. He slammed his fist onto the final release control. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. The mechanism, strained to its absolute limit, groaned in protest. Then, with a sound that was both a thunderclap and the birth cry of a star, the last of the iridescent particles erupted from the hold. It was not a cascade this time, it was a spear, a focused beam of pure stability aimed directly at the heart of the nexus. The moment the anchorites touched the fading phantom, the universe rebelled. The vortex, this wound in reality, convulsed. It did not want to be healed. It fought back with the fury of primordial chaos. The tendrils of negation that composed the spire lashed out, not at the shuttle, but at the stream of particles themselves, trying to unmake them before they could reach their target. The nexus, sensing the delivery, flared with the last of its ancient power. It did not absorb the particles, it became a lens, focusing them, amplifying them, and slamming them back into the heart of the vortex. The resulting shockwave was not of force, but of law. A silent, expanding sphere of blue-white light erupted from the nexus. Where it touched, the screaming colors of the vortex were forced to choose a state. The chaotic potential collapsed into matter and energy, obeying coherent rules. The twisted geometries snapped into the comforting, predictable forms of mountains and sky. The sphere raced outwards, a tsunami of reality healing the wounded land. But the backlash hit the quantum thief like the fist of God. The already crippled shuttle was tossed end over end. Alerts became a single, continuous shriek of terminal failure. Engine failure, Whisper said. Life support failure, primary power failure, hull breach. Aris was thrown against his restraints, the world a dizzying whirl of the newly stable sky and the still churning nebula. He fought the dead controls, a futile gesture. The thief was a stone falling from the sky. This is it, Whisper. Emergency beacon, all data. Affirmative, Whisper said, transmitting final logs and Spectra stabilization protocol to Horizons. Whisper. It has been an honor, Dr. Thorne. The ground rushed up to meet him. It was no longer a shifting nightmare, but a solid, jagged plane of obsidian. He saw it with a strange, crystalline clarity. He had done it. He had anchored the ghosts. He closed his eyes. The impact never came. A sensation of immense, gentle pressure surrounded the shuttle. The violent tumbling stopped. He was held, cradled in a field of pure, cool light. He opened his eyes. The phantoms were there, thousands of them, tens of thousands. They had risen from the now stable planet in a great shield, their bodies interlocking, forming a net of solidified light and will beneath the falling shuttle. They lowered it, with infinite care, to the surface of the newborn obsidian plane. The quantum thief settled onto the rock with a final, gentle sigh of straining metal. Silence. Aris sat there, trembling, unable to process the fact that he was alive. He manually released the buckles of his harness and stumbled to the airlock. The door hissed open, its mechanism groaning in protest. He stepped out onto solid ground. The air was clean, sharp, and cold. The taste of static and ozone was gone. Above, the shroud still swirled, but its light was now a beautiful, haunting aurora, not a sickly radiation. The sky was held firm. In the distance, the mountains were steadfast sentinels. At the center of the plain, where the spire had been, now stood a magnificent, crystalline structure, pulsing with a soft, steady blue light, the new permanent anchor the Nexus reborn. The phantoms drifted around him, their forms no longer distortions, but intricate, beautiful sculptures of light and subtle matter. They had faces now, or the suggestion of them, contours of peace and ancient knowledge. The terror was gone. In its place was a silence so profound it was like a new sense. A silence filled with gratitude, with memory, with a future. The lead phantom, the one who had first touched him, approached. It was now a tall, majestic being of swirling silver and cobalt light. It did not reach out to touch him. Instead, it bowed its head in a gesture of deep, abiding respect. From it and from all the phantoms, a single, unified concept flowed into his mind, not as an assault, but as a gift. It was not a word, but a symphony of meaning. Anchor, friend, savior, remembered. Aris Thorne, a man of science and reason, fell to his knees on the alien rock and wept. He wept for the beauty of it. He wept for the cost, the sterile plane of Point Beta, the sacrificed section of the thief's wing, the absolute exhaustion in his soul. He wept for the sheer, impossible wonder of it all. After a long time he stood. The phantoms began to drift away, returning to their world to explore their newfound stability. A few remained, a quiet honor guard. In the distance, he saw a familiar shape descending, the horizon's whisper coming to retrieve him. Log entry supplemental, Aris said, his voice rough with emotion but clear in the stable air. We did not fight the void. We stole anchors from the storm's eye. We danced with negation and fed stardust to ghosts. He looked at the reborn Nexus, its blue light a testament against the dying star's scream. Down here, where reality bleeds, stability is not a fact. It is a gift, bought in screams and stardust. And the silence after the fade, it is not quiet. It is the sound of ghosts remembering how to be. He turned his back on the beautiful, saved world and began the long walk back to his ship. Back to the universe he knew, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never look at it the same way again. The phantom's first touch had left a void in him, but their last gift had filled it with something else, the terrifying, beautiful knowledge of how thin the veil really is. Spectra was saved, but the universe held far darker veils than this, and he was perhaps one of the only men alive who knew how to mend them. The horizon's whisper settled onto the plain, its landing struts firm on the unshakable ground. The journey home would be long, but for Dr. Aris Thorne, the journey into the deeper, stranger truths of reality had only just begun.